Sup peeps, Rockskull here. It's that time of the year again where I do my obligatory ARK Survival Ascended review, but unlike my other ones, I'm going to try to make this a bit more noob friendly. I'll go more in depth about what this game is about on a base level, and gauge whether I think the game is worth it as a newbie. If you are a veteran, I recommend watching the video I made in 2025, as I still think it holds up well. If you are wondering about my thoughts on the recent releases, I made videos on both Lost Colony and the Rainiel TLC. I'll continue to make more on Genesis and future releases as they come out. Anyway, let's begin with this newbie review. First, I think it's important to go over what exactly ARK Survival Ascended is, as I know many newbies are confused in that regard, for good reason. ARK Survival Ascended, released in 2023, is a remastered version of ARK Survival Evolved, a sandbox survival game with its most unique feature being you can tame prehistoric creatures and fantastical ones, with the fan favorite being the dinosaurs the game features. You then use the creatures to fight bosses if you play PvE, or to defend/raid other bases in the case of PvP. Now you may be asking what exactly in ARK Survival Ascended is different from its predecessor. The main selling point is the graphics using Unreal Engine 5, but the game also features map changes, new base game creatures, cross-platform modding, a new building system, and lots of new paid DLC that weren't in ARK Survival Evolved. We'll go over each of these aspects while giving my own personal thoughts on each section. Also, a very important note about ARK Survival Evolved, they shut down the public servers on the switch to ASA, so only consider buying that game if you want to play single player or private servers. The pricing is also very different for both games. ARK Survival Evolved will cost $15 USD at base, but you only get access to the first release map, the island, and a few free community-made maps. The other canon story maps you will have to buy separately. ARK Survival Ascended, on the other hand, costs $45 USD at base, but you'll get access to remastered versions of all story maps when they are ready, and the free community ones, the only exception being Lost Colony. I'll go over this DLC and others in the DLC section of the video. Now getting to the game itself, as always, we start with graphics, because this is still the main selling point of ARK Survival Ascended, looking at the Steam page. Graphics is a very subjective topic that comes down to personal preference, but if you want my opinion, I do think it's a pretty nice upgrade from ASE, particularly the lighting done in caves, or like during a sunset. My only personal problems with the graphics are the tan-colored rocks everywhere on the older maps, and the weird clouds. Luckily, they've gotten a bit better with both of these things over time on future remastered maps. Creatures also have more detailed textures, but I will admit it looks odd on the creatures with really outdated models and movement animations. Thankfully, this is going to be slowly fixed over time with the TLC creature updates they are doing. Finally, I wanted to touch on the new player characters, and I still hold the opinion that they look a bit odd compared to ASE. The best way I can describe it is that they feel weirdly untextured compared to their ASE counterparts, like they are made out of Play-Doh. Good thing they balanced this out by giving us players more options to create horrific specimens. If you want to have pretty graphics, though, you'll have to get through the performance barrier. The game is better than it was on launch, but overall, those recommended Steam requirements still don't lie. ASA is super graphically intensive, especially on maps like Aberration, or the newly released Lost Colony in Genesis. I cannot speak for this myself, not playing on console, but from what I heard, consoles still seem to struggle at times too in high-end areas. Overall, however, you will have a decent time on console, unless you are trying to run the game on an Xbox Series S for some reason. If you have a lower-end PC or console like that, you really don't have a choice but to play the predecessor, ARK Survival Evolved. There's also a crazy amount of bugs, with a lot of the ones that were present in ASE still appearing in the remastered ASA to this day. I still give the devs a bit more leeway compared to other games, as ASA is a massive game with a lot of elements, and they have gotten a tiny bit better than they were in the past when it comes to patching new bugs out. Some of these bugs force rollbacks on servers, however, which I imagine is extremely annoying. Speaking of, the official public servers in ASA run like doo-doo with cheaters everywhere, and crashes are still a frequent occurrence, especially on newer maps. Overall, performance still is my biggest gripe with this game, as it is something that should have gotten better on the Switch, since ASE was already pretty rough in that regard. The only thing that luckily has gotten a lot better is the load times, both for loading the map itself and for things like caves. Otherwise, it is definitely a downgrade. Now it is time to go over gameplay. We'll start with PvE. The basic loop of PvE in ARK is gathering resources, taming creatures to help you farm more resources and fight other creatures, collecting artifacts from hostile creature-infested caves, and then finally fighting the bosses with your best possible creature army and weapons. This gameplay loop, while not the same on every map, is the reason I adore ARK to this day. There is really no other game like this out there, where you can tame all of these honestly fantastically designed prehistoric and fantasy creatures to fight big bosses. but I will admit to the newbies out there that the game doesn't really teach you how to do these things that well. I've had to look up so many guides, wikis, and random forum posts to get to the ARK knowledge I have today, and yet there is still a ton I know I have yet to learn. The game is super complex, and I wish it at least told you what you were supposed to do when it came to the PvE elements. The best the game has right now is a short cutscene of a character you don't know the name of being like, "Come find me, lol," without really telling you what you were supposed to do, or where you are supposed to go. Like, it is possible for a player to figure this out by plainly exploring the map, but what about taming creatures? Creatures have so many different taming methods now in ARK that it would almost be impossible for someone to figure each one out without looking it up. Don't even get me started on the complexity of mutations. Yeesh. Almost every time I've invited my friends to play ARK, it's felt like I've had to become a professor for a college course. Or I've just had to do absolutely everything because they obviously don't know what to do. The game doesn't tell them. I think the easiest way to solve this right now would be to just at least have an in-game version of the official ARK wiki. That way people would be more inclined to add or edit information on it, and console players can have an easier time accessing it. The final thing I wanted to touch on real quick in this section is mods. As of course usually they get used in PvE. TLDR, it's pretty epic. ASA is one of the few games where you can actually use mods on consoles, instead of it being PC exclusive. There are a few paid ones which can be scummy, looking at the way ASA does the pay split, but there are so many great free mods out there, you don't really need to pay any money. Anyway, to sum up my thoughts on the PvE experience, I adore it, but if you are a new player, be prepared for a large learning curve. Now on to ARK PvP. Dear God, where do I begin? Well, when ARK PvP works, it honestly is pretty fun, but if you ever join an official ARK server, it unfortunately rarely is ever like that. Any of the servers that allow transfers can be particularly a nightmare for new players, as someone can literally spawn in a skyscraper-sized titan to destroy any little base on the beach they want to. The game is also technically very pay to win with the super strong Fantastic Tame DLC creatures, or some things in Lost Colony. Additionally, as I mentioned in the performance section, there are cheaters absolutely everywhere too, as anti-cheat is extremely poorly handled in ARK. If you want to know how bad it is, just watch almost any modern Trafalgar video on cheaters. I'd probably never recommend most official ARK PvP servers, but if you can find a private one that's highly regulated, or perhaps you make your own private one with a group of friends, I do think you can have a really good time. There are so many creatures that you would almost never use in PvE that get used in PvP raiding all the time. Things like turrets and explosives get a lot more use too. There are still some very frustrating elements like the crappy hitboxes, having bases completely hidden in the ground, aka meshing, or the power scaling of weapons and loot drops being quite ridiculous. If you can get past this stuff though, there are some worthwhile elements to ARK's PvP in private servers in my opinion. Finally, I wanted to go over the content updates and paid DLC the game has, and man is it kinda rough. Well, the content releases themselves actually aren't the worst. The game gets a pretty good amount of content with the remastered maps every few months, creature TLCs and balance updates in between, and a good amount of weekly updates from the community managers. The bad stuff starts to come with how these things are released, with the ARK devs being notorious for constantly delaying releases last second. Delaying important releases puts a lot of unneeded distrust on the devs. So again, I really hope at some point they fix this issue. Now onto the DLCs. The best way I can describe them is, meh. There are ones like Bob's Tall Tales that add some fun elements to the older maps that weren't there before. But otherwise, the prices and added elements to these DLCs feel so bleh. Like going to the only paid story map, Lost Colony, it is the most expensive map ARK has ever released to my knowledge. Despite this $30 USD price point, to this day the map has so many broken and unbalanced elements that just never get fixed. I recommend watching my review of the map if you haven't already for my full thoughts. I really dislike the Fantastic Tames too that they've done. Well, the creatures themselves are cool, but constantly selling them for $5 each, while still having them spawn on the maps as untamable if you didn't buy them, is such a scummy practice to me, man. They love releasing these DLCs unfinished too, almost as if you're doing a pre-order. To sum up my thoughts on DLCs, maybe get Bob's Tall Tales if it's on sale, but if you want more stuff to mess with, just download any of the epic free mods out there. These other DLCs just aren't worth the price point in my opinion. Now, with all that being said, is ARK Survival Ascended worth it for a new player? That's up to you to decide with all that I said, but in my opinion, I'd say it just depends. As I've mentioned, there isn't much at all like this game out there, and the unique features it has with the creature designs or the boss fighting in PvE can be a super fun experience, if you can get over the learning curve hiccups like I did when I first started. There are some giant cracks that have been there since the start of ASE, however, that have really only gotten worse as time has gone on. The cheaters, poor performance, and the greedy DLC practices in particular really stand out as the most nasty elements the game always has. If you can get past that stuff by playing single player on a private server, though, I think you can have a good time. Just be careful where you spend your money when it comes to this game, and I definitely really only recommend buying ASA when it's on sale. That's all just my thoughts on ASA, so you can let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with my take if you've played before. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed, and thanks for the support as always, peeps. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.
Rock skull. All he wants to do is stream all night. Lobby full, rock skull. Never gonna play with me, but it's alright.